Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Wise Body Podcast, where we talk about eating disorder recovery and all things body. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Hughes. I bring 20 years of experience as an eating disorder therapist, and I've worked with hundreds of clients to feel more empowered and connected to their body by tapping into the wisdom it holds. I'm so excited to keep learning with you as we navigate the windy path that is recovery. So let's get started. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Body Podcast. Our guest today is Meg McCabe, who's a speaker, educator, podcaster, and podcast coach. She's another reason why the Wise Body Podcast exists, as she helped me launch it. Along with podcasting her very successful show, Full and Thriving, for 5 years, she's also the founder of the global online community, the Recovery Collective, which has been recently rebranded and renamed the Kindred Collective. She is a certified eating disorder recovery coach through the Carolyn Costin Institute and is here today to share her personal eating disorder story and how she became a recovery coach. In today's Wise 5, you'll hear about what a recovery coach even is, the process to becoming one, and how it can be an integral part of your care team. Listen to the end to hear about what's next for Meg, and reach out to her if you have your own podcast idea but could use a little help getting it started. Thanks for listening. Hi, and welcome to the Wise Body Podcast. I am so excited to have Meg McCabe on as our next guest. And Meg, before you came on, I gave a little intro about you and shared your bio so that we could dive right in today. And I hope that's okay.
That works for me. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, this is really special for us. We met through a mutual friend who knew we were both in the field of eating disorders and thought that it would be nice for us to connect, and it very much has. And especially too, because you've helped me launch the Wise Body Podcast with your podcast program, which I am so grateful for. And I know that we will get to that later in this episode. And you've attracted a similar audience with your podcast, Full and Thriving. So this is really awesome that you are on here today. So thank you again.
Oh, you're very welcome. And it is so magical how we were able to connect through our mutual friend who is so near and dear to both of us. And now we're here and your show is fully launched and it is an incredible show. I'm so happy to see all the work you've already done with it and getting this out to the world. So I can't wait to just dive right in today and chat with you.
Thank you, Meg. And I could not have done it without your help and expertise and support. So this is why we're here. It's because of you. So thank you again. And we're talking about eating disorder recovery. And so I really wanted to start with the field of eating disorder recovery coaching. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you got into that and what the process was like for you.
Absolutely. So it goes back several years ago, actually. First of all, I am recovered fully from an eating disorder. And I think the idea of coaching was always in the back of my mind, even when I was going through recovery, because I remember going to therapy sessions and thinking to myself, what do I do now? Like, what do I do between sessions? Like, where's my homework? Where are the challenges? Like, I need something to work on. And, that was not really something that was part of my therapy experience. But I knew that there was a missing piece there. But eventually I recovered and got interested in life coaching. And I actually took this kind of woo-woo life coach training out in Marin County, California. And I was taking, life by the reins in a way. I moved to New York City and started this life coaching practice. And I would host these big events in Manhattan and attract a bunch of people to facilitate groups and coach them in groups. And I would always start my coaching programs with my eating disorder recovery story. It didn't matter what I was teaching about. I would always find that was kind of a moving, powerful story about resilience and aha moments and self-talk and self-compassion, all the things that I was talking about as a coach were kind of embedded into this eating disorder recovery journey. And I found after every workshop I hosted, nobody really cared about the big themes. Everyone would come up to me wanting to know more about the eating disorder, wanting to know about how I got better. They'd all disclose that they were also struggling and they were looking for resources. So my wheels started turning and I realized, okay, maybe I can help people through eating disorder recovery. There's got to be some sort of coaching niche here. And this was about 2015, 2016. And I took to the internet. I was like, is there a certification out there? Is there anything? And it happened to be, I think, around the time Carolyn Costin was starting her eating disorder recovery coaching program. Essentially, I heard Carolyn was familiar with her work, decided right then and there to take the training, and it was just a passion from there on out. And I became fully certified in 2020 and started my own private practice during 2020, which timing was very aligned because during that year, everyone was slipping deeper into their eating disorders because of the isolation piece. So I really also leaned into the idea of building online communities and helping people through eating disorder recovery. So that's my journey in a nutshell. It's really amazing to think back on it, actually. So much fun.
Wow. Well, and it's interesting how it led you to a specific niche working in eating disorders when maybe that's not what you were thinking initially. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it really wasn't. I mean, I am a huge personal development fan, and I'm also a entrepreneurial, like girl boss type fan. I was such a millennial, feeding into girl boss culture back then. I'm like, oh, that was a lot. But I did have a little bit of an internal struggle with calling myself a life coach at the age of 24, 25. I did not feel like I had experienced enough life to have that credibility. So, and then everyone online is saying, you got to find your specialty in order to stand out. And I just feel like this specialty was becoming more and more obvious the more people reached out to me after I shared my story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that people really connected with your personal story. Can you share a little bit about your personal story?
Yes. Oh, man. This is such a throwback. Everything is such a throwback when I reflect. Time just really moves. But my story is pretty much pinnacle mid-2000s. I was in high school. And during this time, the fashion trend was being the thinnest you could possibly be. And it didn't matter. Being curvy wasn't really a thing that was praised. Being plus size was kind of looked down upon. It was just such a toxic environment with messaging around beauty standards when I grew up. And I really internalized all of those beauty standards and connected that with my self-worth, so hardcore. And there was also this reality show called America's Next Top Model that was on TV. Do you remember that show?
Yes. And I remember you referencing it too before, and how they would make public measurements and sizes and weights and heights and all the numbers.
Yes.
Horrible.
Oh, it's so cringy to think about.
Yeah,
but they would take young women, I'm talking ages, I think it was 18 to 24 maybe. And they would all meet Tyra Banks, the host, and a few of the other hosts. And the first episode, they would raid the girls' model apartments and measure their waists, bust size, hip size, height. And they would make them all step on a scale and they would post their weight on national television.
Awful.
And I'm the same height as your average model. I've always been almost 6 feet tall. So I was comparing almost precisely my body with people on TV. And it just became this focus on numbers, and it spiraled into from just a innocent diet, my perfectionism, quote, innocent, and then my perfectionistic tendencies and my need for praise kind of propelled that. It really like fueled something deeper and darker, which was an eating disorder. But I did get a modeling contract, which was a fleeting moment of weird accomplishment for my young self. And I ended up completely spiraling out of my eating disorder, and it went out of control. I ended up having to move to New York, did the modeling thing for a few months, and then moved home and started recovery full force and really didn't look back. And then I kind of like resettled back into the traditional path, going to college, getting a job, and healing my eating disorder over the next few years. Yeah, I don't know how much of that you know, but it was.
Yes, I have heard you talk about it in your own podcast in your early episodes, and then when you've been guests on other podcasts as well. And I think it's important sharing your own story and what's molded you and why you've chosen this field and chosen to be a recovery coach. And I was thinking about another question, in being a recovery coach now, like how much of your own experience impacts your work? Does that come up, or does it feel like so very far away? I guess it's more of like a countertransference question.
I think it's a great question. It impacts everything I do as a coach. I think my secret sauce as a recovery coach is that I see right through the BS of the eating disorder, and I can always sniff it out, and I will tell the truth, and I will tell my clients what I'm seeing, and I can relate to that because I've probably had a lot of those thoughts in the past. I've probably tried to sneak around cutting corners with recovery. I've also, I had bulimia, so I'm very good at helping people like change their behaviors and learn to cope differently and unpacking it. So the ability to connect with my clients is, I feel, a lot stronger because of my experience. And I think there are some people who work with me because I'm able to cut through so quickly with the psychology of it all and my own experience.
Yeah, that you relate to it in a special way, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And I wish, I wish I could talk about it more. Like, I don't bring up my own experience too much in sessions unless people ask. And like, I can see when I have a session and I do like offer a little piece of my recovery, there's like a little spark that sometimes comes up, but I always like sparingly offer that, unless someone really wants to know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it comes up for me sometimes too in sessions, and I have not had an eating disorder. And I feel, I know this might be a strange way of putting it, but I feel like I miraculously dodged a bullet because, as you were explaining, like, a confluence of factors, this perfect storm, right? And then an eating disorder, emerges because everything sort of aligns in such a way, whether it be like environment, right? Genetics, personality, temperament, those kinds of things. And I feel like I had those pieces as well. And I was a swimmer. I was in a bathing suit a majority of my young life. And I guess I had enough like protective factors, if you will, to keep me from it. But I'm really kind of feel dumbfounded that it didn't happen. And I, feel fortunate because I know in a different way, not personally, but just in working in this field for 20 years, just how painful it is. And so I'm sorry that that's been part of your life. And I'm so happy that like you feel on the other side and are able to like help other people through it. So
yeah. Well, thank you.
Really.
And I think you bring up a really good point about, a lot of us on paper have very similar backgrounds, upbringings. We were brought up in the same culture. And, my story, especially like the fun, interesting part is the pop culture references and like the stuff that I was influenced by. But I do think there were deeper issues to my eating disorder that would take a whole different show to kind of unpack. But I think what it came down a lot for me on a deeper level was trouble expressing negative emotion and like not being able to really understand my like the whole negative side of the spectrum of them. Not, emotions are technically neutral, right? But we have like anger and fear and like rage and shame, and those I feel like I didn't have the emotional language to almost like cope with those emotions and express those when I was really young. And so I think if we're thinking of like maybe how you could have dodged a bullet or other people could have dodged a bullet is, like maybe you had better tools in your like emotional toolbox growing up, which isn't an obvious thing. Like as a young person, you don't even recognize if you have those tools or if you don't. I didn't really start taking a serious look at my ability to cope with emotion and express emotion until I was at least in my 20s, I think.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So
It's not something.
I don't know. There's always so many reasons and nuances why somebody would have an eating disorder and why somebody wouldn't. And you mentioned protective factors. There's always a slew of those too.
And to fully go on a tangent, I remember like thanking my swim coach and my mom too, who were the greatest influences of how, I saw myself, right? And it was well after I wrote my dissertation and I really reflected on it, like, wow, this is amazing that this did not happen. And there are some people I really am indebted to and need to express my gratitude. And so, yeah, I thanked my coach for never talking about nutrition or dieting or our bodies and the influence of weight and performance. Like it was just never a thing ever. And with my mom, just her not berating her own body and not going on or talking about diets. So I really just feeling a lot of gratitude for them both. And yes, this could probably be another episode. I feel like I say this every episode. Let's have another one. So maybe we can talk more specifics about these things. But for now, bringing it back to recovery coaching, which is what you do, I have a couple more questions about that. Like, what's the training like?
Oh, the training. I had an impression that it would be a quick few months of training. It took me 2 years to complete the training because I was working full time. It felt like an online master's program by the time I was done with it. Like I was like, can we make this a master's program? Because I feel like I've been working nonstop for 2 years. But Carolyn Costin runs a tight ship, and like, there's 12 online modules. There's a written exam, and then there's a ton of written essays, and then you also have to record 10 sessions for free with potential clients. At least this was when I was going through. Things have also changed. I don't know everything now, but that was the structure, and I think that's still loosely the structure.
A lot.
So you're not just reading a few books. You have to read books before you even begin. Then you are preparing for a written exam. These essays, Carolyn had me rewrite like 3 of them. It wasn't like, oh, you just did it and you're okay. It was like, this sucked. You have to redo it. At least that's what it felt like to me. Like she didn't say that, but I was like, whoa, I have to redo this. How bad was it? And then finally the whole idea of finding volunteers who could be your clients and are okay with you recording your sessions and sending them for feedback.
Wow.
When you're working full time, it takes a lot of effort to do that and get all the feedback and then find another one. And so that was a strenuous process for me, but it's a rigorous one and it's important. And I think that's why the Carolyn Costin Institute is the destination institute, in my opinion, for becoming a recovery coach, because it's thorough and you really learn how you fit into the recovery model, and you learn to kind of respect the system that you're kind of finding your way into, right? As opposed to maybe some programs where they're not really taught to have a collaborative team or what that looks like. A coach, I find this so important. A skilled coach will not take on a client who doesn't already have a therapist, dietitian, or both. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important, because the need for all of those expertises, those experts, really is there. You can't take an online course and expect to just like be the sole helper and supporter of people with eating disorders.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does require a team. I talked about that a little bit in previous episodes, and leads me to my next question, how you play this integral part of a care team. And how do you do that? Like, what do you think is most important there? I mean, I know like you have this requirement, which is great, that a client has to have a therapist and a dietitian. But how do you feel like you work with them both? How do you collaborate?
Yeah.
Like, what's most important there?
Well, I think the unique factor that coaches bring to the table is that there isn't as much red tape around communication with clients between sessions. So I feel like the coach is really that day-to-day support person who is helping you set challenges and goals for yourself and working toward behavior change and applying the tactics you need to recover. So maybe you're working on trying a new fear food or increasing the plan. That's not something I would really pick for my client. I would consult the dietitian and then help execute the plan, right? And that's done through tech support usually. So the behavior change component is really helpful. And then also I find on a therapeutic side of things, learning to actually use your coping skills. So I find in therapy, maybe you're talking about coping or just unpacking and using therapy as a way to like express yourself and kind of cope with things in that moment. But I will always direct my clients in the moment to, hey, how about you experiment with this coping skill or that coping skill? These are positive coping skills that can put the eating disorder out of a job. So if they're feeling an urge to skip a meal or use a behavior or whatever, if they reach out to me in the moment, first of all, externalizing that urge and that feeling can diffuse the situation altogether. Secondly, I can be the person who also gives you that healthy self-reflection and say, like, what's something else you can turn to in this moment to help you through this emotion, right? Or what are you feeling? Like, that might be helpful to name the emotion. And how can you cope with this in a more healthy way? So I find coaching is this beautiful, like, practical tool where you're building skills and moving towards recovery in a more actionable way. Because we all know that you can become an intellectual recovery hero and just read it. Just read all the books and the research and go to the conferences and like talk to 30 different experts. But if you're not willing to take the action, you're not going to get better. Unfortunately, you do have to face the food and sit with the uncomfortable emotions between sessions. And that's kind of what the coaches are here to help with.
Yeah. In between. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as the coaching landscape goes, we are constantly collaborating with the team. So I like to kind of get everyone to communicate more, right? I think that's one issue with the eating disorder field in the outpatient setting is sometimes there is no communication. And so I find a good coach is going to kind of corral everyone together and get some sort of streamlined communication intact.
Yeah, I think that's paramount. Yeah, I talk about that a lot too. Collaboration is key. Everyone being on the same page so that there's no confusion. People we're saying the same thing, and hopefully in a clear and direct way. What's your favorite part about being a recovery coach?
So I love so many things about being a recovery coach. Two big things come to mind. The first one is the quality of the relationship that you build with your one-on-one clients. Like, there ends up being so much trust in that process, and it's a really special relationship because I've had an eating disorder in the past, so I can relate to them. They can relate to me, and I am, guiding them through this journey. And it's truly an honor to help them throughout the process. And it's a really intimate part of the puzzle in a way, because I am that person who is connecting with them between sessions through tech support. It feels like a close relationship. And I'm just realizing that it's a very special one. Like, the more I actually branch into other versions of business, I realize how special it is to really work with someone who's committed to their own healing and committed to working with you together towards that ultimate goal. So I find that to be one of my favorite parts. And then my other favorite part about coaching is diving into the in-depth educational piece of recovery. So as an eating disorder recovery coach, I am truly, sometimes, not all the time, one of the only experts and specialists on the team. Like, a lot of times people aren't lucky enough to have therapists like yourself who are specialized, or even dietitians who are specialized. So being able to provide some of the basic nutritional education, or the basic psychoeducation, or even the way the body works, can really change the way people heal, in my opinion. Seeing those light bulbs come off around this is helpful in this way because of this theory that Meg taught me, or whatever. I just find that being able to teach tools, frameworks, different skills in depth is really fun. So I've always considered myself a community health educator. And I actually feel like that is something I've really perfected through my one-on-one coaching practice, but also through my podcast and through the Recovery Collective, which is now the Kindred Collective. So I'm constantly putting together content where I teach and help people through giving them new information and knowledge. So for instance, there might be an episode about how to heal your relationship with exercise, right? There's different steps and methods I use as a coach to help people minimize or hopefully eliminate exercise if they need to. Or maybe it's how to build more regularity and adequacy in your nutritional plan. Teaching those things, how to add variety, how to challenge a fear food, all the things, how to stop weighing yourself. All of these things I can dive in depth and help teach. And that is really, really fun for me. And I do that on all versions of my business, which is cool.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned just practical tools, and I think that's most helpful, right? We can talk about and theorize about, different ways of changing, but actually taking action steps to make behavioral change, guiding someone through that is so awesome.
Yeah. And it's really fun for me, and it's rewarding for me, because at the end of every session, I actually pull out a shared document with my client and we write out homework assignments. And it's nothing overwhelming, but usually it's 2 to 3 challenges or written assignments or something to do with challenging food or taking action that person has the week to work on, and they can connect with me throughout the week about that, which is really special. But absolutely love it when my clients actually do their homework. And like, you can tell they worked hard and tried the challenge to the best of their ability, or did the thing, like maybe it's cooking a certain food or trying a different version of this fear food or going out to eat or grocery shopping. Like, so yeah, there's so much I do when it comes to that tangible piece of recovery, where I find therapy, as you know, is more like talking about the roots of the disorder, maybe some trauma around it, maybe some of those deeper emotional pieces of the puzzle. So you might not always get to the tangible takeaways, which is allowed, right? That's why therapy is so wonderful, because sometimes you need to spend a session talking about your relationship with your, mom or your traumatic history, right? And you might not get to the food. So that's why I like what I do, because I'm always bringing it back to the food and bringing it back to the behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I agree. And I talk with clients all the time that, the processing piece might come later because that takes longer. Right. But like, what's most important is like making sure that you're well nourished. And so it's nice that there's that collaboration between, you and other members of the team to really work towards that goal.
Mm-hmm. And I think some people have that confusion too of like, oh, I need to have everything figured out before I can work on the food. Right. But in reality, you can work on the food before you figure out the deeper stuff.
Right. And it's essential. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really essential. So.
Yeah. Because I think we were talking about this before in another question. I didn't put it this way, but like, you don't want to be in that like land of purgatory where it's sort of like you can intellectualize and read a lot and try and prepare and plan to make change. But when it comes down to it, to change your brain, you have to change the behavior and keep doing it. And that's like where the rubber meets the road, if you will. Like that's the really hard part. And so, yeah, I think we're really aligned that way. Like I think we work together. We work well together.
Absolutely. And I do want to even say to all those people listening, like there's the challenges and making the change. And then there's also consistency. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of people let themselves down a little, is like they will feel good one day and challenge themselves and do the thing, but they aren't consistent with making it a part of their lives. So, you have to learn to take the action on the bad days, and you have to take the action when it's hard. You have to take the action when you're not feeling good. And that's when the change really happens. So that consistency piece is so important to really changing that brain wiring, that, the neural programming that you have. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yes.
So fascinating, the change that needs to be made. And it's a lot of change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard.
Yeah. It can take some time for sure. And I love, like, you have so many amazing episodes in your podcast, Full and Thriving. And I know some of our topics will overlap. And in my first episode, I mentioned, like, I know I'm not like the first, eating disorder recovery podcast, right? And that's good. Like we all need each other and need to keep talking about these things. And so I'm so glad that you have and that we continue to. And congratulations, by the way, on 5 years of making the Full and Thriving podcast. It's so successful. And what an amazing run you've had. I know some of your listeners, like, were sad, like when you posted your last episode for now, but it kind of begs, like, what's next for you?
Thanks for asking that. And thanks for the congratulations. I cannot believe it's been 5 years. It's probably one of the most consistent things I've ever done professionally for myself. And I'm really proud of the Full and Thriving podcast, and it transformed my life. It transformed my career, and it transformed my confidence and skill set in being a speaker and a coach and a presenter and just having my voice. So it's such a testament to the power of podcasting as a tool to be a teaching device almost. Like podcasting can help me spread my message and teach, and that's exactly what it's done. So I honor the podcast. I will always be so grateful for it. And I did have a baby 8 months ago, so this is all why I'm just pausing on podcasting. I love podcasting with my heart and soul. I love the Full and Thriving podcast. I love everybody. And I'm so grateful for anyone who ever listened or wrote a review. But I found that I have to switch priorities right now, and I'm making a huge shift in my business. So while I'm continuing to do a small private practice for coaching, I only have a few clients who I've been working with for a substantial period of time at this point, who I'm working with one-on-one. If you're listening to this, don't be discouraged. I will be supporting you as long as you need me. However, I'm also shifting because I'm realizing how much I love media and communications and having a voice. And so my new mission is to help people start and launch their own podcasts and share their messaging with the world and just learn how to find their voice. And I've created a new program called the Thriving Podcaster Program. And that's kind of been where I've been focused. It just feels a little bit lighter for me during this time where my priorities are focused on like my family and raising a baby. And that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm grateful that I've built this small and robust little personal brand where I could make that shift without it feeling too difficult to do. Right. So I'll stop there because I'm sure you have something to say.
Well, yes, I have greatly benefited from, you being such an expert in podcasting and, guiding me through all of the nuances of it that I would not have ever thought about or considered because I sort of came to this idea of the Wise Body podcast is simply like, oh, well, this is a way of me talking about certain topics and bringing my friends and / colleagues on to talk about, not just eating disorder recovery, but like things related to the body. And I thought I'd just like jump on and like just get going and start. And there's more to it than that. And I think you helped me really prepare for that part of it. And to, find my rhythm in it and keeping me more like organized around it because it really does require that like persistent attention to it, and yeah. So,
yeah, well, I appreciate that. And you've grown so much and you have an amazing show. So I'm excited to see where this goes. And there is a lot to it. There's, definitely a rhythm and a cadence you need to keep up with the flow of weekly episodes. And I will say it's not for the faint of heart either. It's a huge endeavor. 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3.
Wow.
So
we did it.
You did it. So you're in the top 10% of podcasters already. Congratulations. Actually, if people complete my program, they're required to have 3 episodes by the end.
Right.
So if you make it to the 4th one,
Guaranteed.
You are like setting yourself apart.
Yeah.
I think am I your 4th?
5th episode.
Look at you. Look at you guys. So cool.
Keep going.
So yeah, and that is really it. I'm just so grateful for that. I host free webinars like every 2 weeks to teach people the basics. And then they have the opportunity to opt into that podcasting program, which is a one-on-one intensive. And it's very rewarding, especially if you're someone who wants to teach or entertain or inspire. I mean, whatever your podcasting goals are, it's just a very exciting project to focus on.
Yeah, you helped make it a reality. And for me, it was like a dream for a long time and a thought, years. And so I think, I know I told you this when we first met, but like I needed like the encouragement to start and to do it. And I think that's like so amazing that you make this commitment to getting 3 episodes out, because that's when you really feel, all that goes into it. But you're there every step of the way. So I really appreciate that. And I feel like now we're like friends for life.
Yes, and we're right down the road from each other, which is great. I'm so excited to just see where your show takes you and your practice and, how things evolve from here. And I'm definitely going to be in your neck of the woods. I love your town, so it's just so cute and cozy over there. So I'll make sure to stop by one of these days.
Please do. And Meg, I, really thank you for working with me and being on here today. And I wish you the best in all of your future endeavors. You're so inspirational, and like the world is your oyster. I feel like there's nothing that you cannot do. And so I look forward to like how you evolve and how you develop, your brand. It's really cool and inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on the show today.
Of course. Thank you so much. And stay tuned for the next episode next. Bye for now. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen in this week. I'm so glad you're here with me as we learn more from our wise bodies and about eating disorder recovery. For more, follow me on social media, and please share the Wise Body podcast with your friends. Lastly, if you're interested in a free client consultation, please reach out on drhughes.com. And remember, always take care of yourself and your temple. See you next time on the Wise Body podcast.